The midway point of the college football season and the story of the first half was the validation of Indiana's rise until Sunday when James Franklin got fired at Penn State. This is the College Game Day podcast. We are recording early, a bit of an emergency edition. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and Dan Wetzel with you. So James Franklin, in his 12th season at Penn State, after going 104-45, a mere 7 games after his team was on a drive that could have put them in the national championship game. 15 days ago, they were ranked 3rd in the country, had a lead on Oregon in overtime in front of a whiteout crowd. And since then, an unprecedented collapse, a collapse unlike any I've ever seen in my 30 years at ESPN and 10 years before that of covering this sport and a lifetime of following this sport. I've never seen anything like it that did not include some personal moral failure or a breach of ethical conduct or rules violations. The Nittany Lions lost a devastating game. They let go of the rope. They lost control of a season, and now their program is at the bottom, and they're getting ready to start over. Crashed out in a period of 2 weeks, not even a full season's worth of games away from maybe playing for, and who knows, maybe winning the national championship. They played Ohio State pretty well in the regular season a year ago. I've never seen anything like it, guys. Pete, I know you covered this story. I'm pretty sure you broke this story. Everybody, they chanted for it at the end of the Northwestern game. Now, don't get me wrong here, man. That UCLA and Northwestern games, losing back-to-back as 3 touchdown favorites, inexcusable. But this seems borderline nuts to pull the trigger on this in the middle of the season, even if you're going to go your separate ways at the end of the year.
Well, let me give you 2 perspectives. You said 17 days ago they have Oregon in overtime, and in a classic whiteout game. 2 days before that, Stanford Steve and I went to Penn State football practice. We got to town early to State College, and they're 3-0, loaded with talent. Hey, look at that tight. Look at Luke Reynolds running on the field. Look at Girat. Like, if somebody had come up to me on the sideline and said, by Columbus Day, the program will have tanked on the field and James Franklin would be fired, I would have been like, buddy, like you need to get medicated or something, because that just would have been so unfathomable 3 weeks ago if that idea was even floated. So I'm going to say that, and I'm going to make sure I say this early in the show because I want it to be clear. Like, James Franklin did a lot for that university, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, you covered the Sandusky scandal just like I did earlier in our careers, and that place was at rock bottom. Bill O'Brien saved the thing, got out when the sanctions were more than he was mentioned to him up front. And James Franklin went in and just rebuilt it. They were moving D linemen to O line. They were he did a lot of hard work to bring them back to respectability, competitiveness, and contention. And ultimately, this decision was made. My understanding from talking to people was that they did not win a championship. Well, they hadn't won a Big Ten championship since 2016. And his big game failures, you can pick your stat, top 5, top 10. The numbers are the numbers. People listening to this podcast don't need a whole recitation of James Franklin's big game struggles. They were very real and searing. That, combined with the free fall this year, gave the brass at Penn State the realization that it's not going to happen under James Franklin after 12 years. And they made a move, in part of the timing, because that's obviously one of the surprising parts about this is it happened on a Sunday in early October, was that, look, Drew Aller's hurt. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. His college career, barring some sort of litigation lightning bolt, is over. And they're not going to be very good, right? They just haven't been good. And with the backup quarterback, you would have to think they're not good. Now, that said, UCLA, heck, they could make the Big Ten title game, I think, still, if you do some funny math, right? So, I don't think they're mathematically eliminated yet. So you do never know. But it's a fascinating dichotomy of, just all around excellence that never crossed the threshold to the highest levels elite that the university aspires to. So one of the most fascinating inflection points I've seen a school with a coach. And I'm surprised. Like, I hit the button on the thing today and I still couldn't quite believe it. Even though it was very real and in motion.
I think this is a modern free fall that maybe we're going to see more of it's shocking now, and then in the future maybe it'll be less so. The idea that James Franklin could go fall apart this quickly, or a 3-game losing streak could happen. The competitive balance in college football is just different. The expectations when boosters are paying big NIL money onto rosters are different. You say, man, this is a lost season, regroup and come back the following year. You've got to go back to pretty much the same guys that are funding this roster and say, hey, I need another $1 million for next year. Hey, I need another $500,000 here. And you go, man, I'm not giving that money to when the coach just screwed up the last season, if that's how they feel it. James Franklin's done incredible jobs, but you're no longer really working for an institution. You're working for a collective of ownership that's paying your roster and funding all your stuff. And those guys, you've asked for everything, you've gotten everything. It doesn't work. And then I look at just the fact that he lost these games. Now, look, I'm not going to make any excuses for losing to UCLA and to Northwestern. Penn State should win those games. That said, as bad as UCLA looked in the first 4 games of the season, and when we were making fun of them, I think a week ago, for losing to UCLA, I did note, because people say, well, it's the first winless team to beat a ranked team since UTEP in 1985. I not brushed up on my minors roster from the 85 season, but I don't think they had a guy like Nico Iamaleava on the team. You didn't have a quarterback that will likely play some level of the NFL. And UCLA, that's a different looking 0-4 team. And all of a sudden you get the right offensive coordinator and the guys get going. Not that bad of a team. Northwestern, yeah, it's Northwestern. We get it. That's the brand name, but their roster is better than that. That team was pretty good yesterday. They're 4-2. Yeah, they lost to Oregon and they lost a game to Tulane early, but I don't know how they're going to do. It's a far more competitive, balanced, far more professional level type thing where if you don't bring it every week, you're going to lose. You just can't rely on the talent differential that you had in the past. So I don't know whether I'm not saying that James Franklin shouldn't have been fired or whatever. This is how they felt it, but you're kind of caught between those things. There's a reality that winning every game, winning any game is not simple anymore, or not as simple as it used to be. And you have people who are funding it that have a great say in your future saying, yeah, I don't really care. You need to win. And how are we going to just, keep that together? James Franklin he got on the wrong side of it in the last 3 weeks.
You know what, Dan? I think that's a point that I think is going to drive the future of this. I think you're going to see some impact on the length of coaching contracts. You're going to see some impact on how buyouts are structured. And this has been professional sports for decades. It just used to be under the table professional sports where people were paid in paper bags and through, slush funds and hidden money. And now it's up front. So now that it's up front, a move like this is what the Lakers do when they've sunk a lot of money into a roster and they're not winning enough. This is what the Yankees used to do. Some Yankees fans would like to see it now, but that's what they used to do whenever they weren't performing to the level of the payroll. It's what NFL teams do all the time to try to give the team a spark because they're not responding to the coach. You're going to see more of this because now this is professionalized up front. And I don't want anybody listening to this to misunderstand. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it is. It's just the way it is now. So coaches have had all the power. They've had the longevity. They've had the protection of their contracts. And I think that things are starting to shift and more money's coming in. And there's the whole private money thing that I guess is close to coming in at the Big Ten. And if that happens, you might even see more access to funds to be able to do something like this. So you have to win. And that's part and parcel of the deal. So I don't begrudge Penn State for making it because we all serve at the pleasure of our employers. When they get ready to make a move, they have to live up to the terms of the contract. They have to pay you. And if they do that, well, that's the way it is. But I don't know that I see the wisdom of it. And it seems crazy when you think about how quickly this turned. We gave the 7 games and the 15 days. Let me give you a list. Would you guys care to take a guess? Over the past 3.5 seasons, Can you list the coaches who've won more games than James Franklin over the last 3.5 years?
I'll guess Ryan Day, Kirby Smart.
That's 2.
And probably because of Washington, Kalen DeBoer.
I should have said 3.5 seasons, same place. So that's
okay.
Well, right. But yeah. Dan Lanning is the other one. And that's the list. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Same number of wins as Marcus Freeman. Same number as Steve Sarkisian and 1 fewer loss. Better than Lane Kiffin. Better than Dabo Swinney. Better than Brian Kelly. And, the top 10 record, which is a fair criticism. And it's absolutely something James Franklin has to wear and should wear. Because the one thing he didn't do at Penn State, and Pete, you and I talked about this quite a bit, when they lost at UCLA, that was really the first time they had done something like that. In this day and age of the sport, it happens to everybody at some point if you're not named Nick Saban. I mean, the one time when he got his 100-game winning streak against unranked opponents ended, it was in Kyle Field against a Texas A&M team that won 8 games and wound up ranked. So, it happens to everybody. But it hadn't happened to James Franklin until UCLA. Then it happened in back-to-back weeks. But what Franklin didn't do was win games when he had equal or lesser talent. And the great ones do that every now and then. Or even if he is a great one, they find a way to get it done at the place where they are. And he didn't do that. And because of that, that's going to cause frustration. And it did in the Penn State fan base. And it ultimately led to his dismissal. But, I've in talking to, people who understand that situation, apparently there were some upset players in the locker room.
Sure.
And disappointed. Of course they are. But you know what? And I know that there are guys in that locker room that gave every breath and every ounce of energy and every bit of commitment you can imagine to try to make Penn State great. But not all of them did, because they're too talented to put the product on the field that we've seen. It is the coach's responsibility to make sure that you play at a high level. It's the head coach's responsibility particularly. Jim Knowles, was his scheme not good enough to have you tackle Nico Iamaleava? A year ago, we were talking about Andy Kotelnicki. How creative. Look at him use Tyler Warren. Look at him use all of these offensive linemen. Look at the way he brings Bo Prabula in here. You don't know which way the ball's going to go next. Now, all of a sudden, he can't do it. He can't move the ball. Give me a break. Give me a break, man. It is the coach's responsibility for sure, because they're getting the biggest bucks and they're the leaders. But let me tell you something. If you're a Penn State player, somebody sends you this, you're listening to this, and you want to get mad, you want to say the administration, shouldn't have done this, they quit on us, blah, blah, blah. When you're looking to point fingers, that's fine. Make sure you point one in the mirror, because the players didn't live up to their end of the bargain. And you say, how in the world can you criticize the players? They're 18 to 22 years old. This is part and parcel of what happens when you get paid. I would love it if I could come on here and give all of my opinions and go on game day every week and say the things I want to and never have to be criticized for it. It's not the way the world works. When you're a professional, and the players are professionals and they're men, they may be young men and not fully mature men, but they're men, you're going to get some criticism. Your coaches bear the brunt of this because it is their job to get you to play at a high level. And while I remember having a discussion and telling a coach one time who came to one of our seminars, a coach who I love and respect, who's no longer in the game, and he said, our number one job is to develop young men. After the thing was over, I didn't want to call him out in front of everybody. I went to him and said, no, it's not. I said, you can do that. There's nothing that says you can't do both. But tell me how many young men you get a chance to develop if you don't win. Your number one job is to win. They didn't win enough. It's their responsibility. They get fired for it. It's their responsibility. They deserve the blame. They've earned it. They've got the contract. That's the way it goes. But not exclusively. Those guys wearing those Penn State uniforms deserve some of the blame too, because they didn't play with the passion, energy, and fire that they needed to in these last 2 games. And truth be told, really the only night we saw it was against Oregon. First 3 weeks wasn't good either, which was probably a big indicator to the administration, I would guess, that things weren't going to get better, and they thought they'd hit the plateau, and now they're going to hit the reset button.
So I thought Dan made an interesting point of whether this is a harbinger of a new era, a signal flare, or inflection point, whatever we want, whatever fancy word we want to use. But is this a sign times have changed? The best analogy I can give to this type of crossroads was Brian Kelly's 4-8 season at Notre Dame. Now, again, no comparisons are perfect, right? They're all going to be a little bit clunky. But at that point, Kelly had been there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. He had made the BCS title game. He had made the Fiesta Bowl the year before, and they just had an all-time clunker at 4-8. And Jack Swarbrick stepped back and said, we're going to reboot this thing and we're going to make it right, but this is our guy and this is what we're going to do. And in that era, that made a lot of sense, right? And it was a great move. They came back. I believe they made another title game, and Mike Elko got hired, Chip Long got hired, and they forged right back on to double-digit wins and Fiesta Bowls and the whole thing. And I think it's interesting that Franklin never really got a chance to do the reset. College football to me has never been more of a year-to-year business. All of our predictions, they all suck, right? All of them suck, right?
Except yours of Indiana going to the playoff. That looks brilliant now.
But I had Penn State winning the national title, so I'm not going to go to the chiropractor patting myself on the back for my predictions this year. Go Sig. But it's.
As someone once said, let's just forget about that one.
Right? Yes, we're gonna forget about that one.
Same as Clemson for me.
I'm not going to bring up anyone else's bad predictions because anyone who's banking on predictions in college football to be a big part of their career quiver of arrows is probably really not going to do it very well. But it's I this morning when I woke up, I thought James Franklin would get a reboot. I did not, or maybe a little more time. I did. Now, as the morning went on, all of a sudden it became a little more apparent that the winds may have changed there. But to me, I think Dan's right. This is not a move I don't know. Is there a precedent to a move like this? Just a guy coming off that much success? It's hard for me to come up with one.
Orgeron had a full season and part of another one. Gene Chizik the same. I think he might have. I don't know if he I can't remember if he made it all the way through 12 after, the difference being that Orgeron and Chizik won national championships.
Yes, correct.
But I can't think, Dan, I don't know. Can
Harbaugh
you think of anything like
and
this?
He got another year. He had that COVID year, which was a disaster. And that was COVID. They cut his pay and then boom, he comes back and it's all bad. But Pete's point is correct. There was a reboot. Here's the thing. Those guys, that was an era when you ran a program. Now you coach a team. Okay. It's totally different. This is a totally different sport.
Great point.
And we'll talk about Cignetti in a minute. I need to write a country music song. Rece, I think I could do this. Maybe you can help me. It's like college football don't care who your daddy is anymore, man. It does not matter what you used to do. It doesn't matter what the helmet logo says. You got a room full of Dusty Heismans. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't really matter. It's how good you get your guys, what guys you get each year, and how well you coach them each week. And that's the part where it's like professional football. And so if Northwestern does it or UCLA gets their act together, this is what you get. And so you lose games. The problem I think we're in the middle of, and I'm not saying Penn State shouldn't have fired James Franklin. I'm really kind of agnostic on it. I don't, whatever. You were coming up at Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana. This could have gotten really, really ugly. Who knows? But people think and still expect we can't lose to them. It's no one's birthright anymore to just go 11-2. Nobody. Maybe Ohio State. Other than Ohio State. It's no one's birthright to just expect, well, we're just going to be really, really, really good. Not Texas, not Penn State, not Georgia, not Alabama.
It was less than a calendar year when Ohio State was ready to do to Ryan Day.
They wanted to fire him.
What Penn State just did to James Franklin. Now,
if there wasn't a playoff, what are the chances that Ryan Day gets fired if there wasn't a playoff after the fourth loss to Michigan? It's not zero, okay? It's not zero. And so the idea is that Penn State's in this position where it's a whole new world. You've got all these, anybody can beat anybody, okay? I did these stats today. The average score, right, in the NFL, super competitive, any given Sunday, the average margin of victory in the NFL this season is 10.8 points a game. The average in the SEC is 10.7. It's more competitive than the NFL. The Big
Wow.
Ten is 14.3. And if you take a couple teams out of either one of those, this thing drops precipitously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's all one-score games. We talk about the Big 12. Who's winning each week? No idea. Texas Tech's probably winning them all. But other than that, I don't know. Colorado beats Iowa State, but then Cincinnati's back. This is college football. You are coaching a team. It is a complete free-for-all, and every year you have to prove it. And so a guy like James Franklin, I'm just going to say this. I like James Franklin. He's a very, very – I thought he's a very good coach. Yeah. He's a very good person. He's always treated me very nicely. I always respected the way he ran his program. Nothing. But maybe he is the perfect coach for the last era when those are the type of things you said, I'm going to send my kid, because if I had a son – I don't have any sons, but if I did and he played football and he got to go play for Coach James Franklin, I'd been, absolutely. This is a terrific guy. That mattered at a time. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter that much anymore. And now it's like, no. And so you watch and you see an Indiana team that all of a sudden has just a crushing defensive line and they're playing this way and they're freewheeling. It's a whole new gig right now. This is professional football on college campuses, and everyone's got to come to grips with that. I don't expect the Penn State boosters got there. And if I had doled out $2 million so we could re-sign a running back, I probably have a different opinion on this thing too. I wouldn't be as patient, but I just think we're in a whole different world, which is why we have a whole different thing where you're going, wait, what just happened? James Franklin got fired? How the heck does that happen? This isn't 2019, let alone this ain't even 2022.
I agree with you, Dan. It's, first of all, I don't have this big objection to James Franklin being fired. My point earlier was I want to make sure that the players know that changed in this era is that they wear some of this. But I also think that sometimes the burden of a program, when it's had failures like Penn State has had on massive stages, that sometimes a fresh set of downs benefits everybody. But you better be careful because, look, Franklin's big game failures are evident. The record is there, 4-21 at Penn State against top 10 teams, 1-18 if they were in the Big Ten. He's tied with Gary Pinkel, Hall of Fame coach, by the way, for the third worst record by a head coach at a single place against AP top 10 opponents in the poll era. The moral of the story is it's really hard to beat good teams. And the guy who put together the greatest long-term reclamation/resurrection project in the history of the sport is Bill Snyder. He was 5-38 against top 10 opponents. Now, I understand the differences. Penn State is supposed to be able to get equal talent. When Gary Pinkel was at Missouri, certainly when Bill Snyder was at Kansas State, that was less likely. Though in the later stages, Bill Snyder certainly had great players in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I get it, and I understand it. But I don't think that just changing coaches is any guarantee because it is very much like the NFL. And I mean, you look at teams, Penn State's not the only one that's fallen off. Florida State's back. Florida State's 3-0. Now they've lost 3 games in a row. They're the same ones. I saw the stuff on our friends at the message board geniuses. They're ready to move on from Mike Norvell.
Everybody's getting fired.
It's only been a couple years since he had an undefeated regular season. And so that it's going to happen. Times have changed. I think the difference is that even like in the NFL, though it's probably closer now than it's ever been, in the NFL, the level of talent is so close that sometimes a little spark like that can get you right within the season. It's not going to get Penn State right. They might upset somebody along the way, but I mean, especially with Allard hurt now. And Allard didn't have the greatest season, probably not that he would have expected up to this point, had not played to his capabilities. But they're not going to get right. And that's the difference, I think, to me, in making a coaching change midstream in college and the NFL. People say, well, UCLA's gotten right. They're already done. It doesn't mean anything. They won a game against a free-falling team, and they beat a team that might be the worst team in the Big Ten, since UCLA apparently is not that anymore. And I'm not trying to take away from that. Good for them. Great job responding. A tremendous job. And I don't want to get us off on a tangent, but don't you have to hire Jerry Neuheisel if it keeps up? I mean, it's like straight out of Central Casting to be the UCLA coach. You can rely on
29.
Hey,
29.
How?
That's another thing. Look what they're doing in the NFL, Pete. That's exactly what they're doing in the NFL. They're hiring these whiz kid guys, 29, 30 years old.
Declan Doyle.
Yeah.
I'm not going to disagree with you. Let me play devil's advocate here on you, Rece, okay? Because I really don't disagree.
Please do.
With you, but
go ahead and disagree. I don't mind.
they're not going to – Penn State's not going to make the playoff, right? But you take a look at UCLA. They did rebound their season. It means a lot.
Well, relative to losing to New Mexico by 1,000, yes.
25. But now you got some momentum. You have to keep your boosters motivated. You have to keep them bought in. And
I
so
agree with
now everyone's going, hey, man, UCLA, this is fun. And the players on the team, you've now, are they going to, it's funny because, as we said, I think I said on Twitter, that Northwestern UCLA game was sneakily a massive game in Big Ten standings 2 weeks ago. We didn't know at the time. We didn't discuss it. But they still control their destiny for the playoff, technically. They could win out and win the Big Ten. Okay. But they have something going. The place has life. You change. So I'm not all bought in on this. Okay. But I'm just saying, is there something to that where you go, listen, maybe we get something going here at Penn State. Maybe there's a spark. I mean, you lose Aller. They got a lot of problems, but maybe you'd be here. I don't know. They paid $49 million and they're going to have to buy out these. I mean, they are spending an extraordinary amount of money to get rid of James Franklin. This is crazy. But okay. So there's the other point. At what point, this guy never should have got a 10-year contract. You want to leave. Some of these schools have got to just be like, listen, we got a good thing going here. If you don't want to be here, you go. We're not giving a $10 million contract, so we owe $50 million. All these schools are on the hook for these ridiculous. It's not 2022. It's not 2019. It sure as heck in 2008. You run a team, not a program. You give these guys short-term deals that you can get out of. And stop fearing it, because nobody can you guarantee is going to be good for the next 10 years, because I don't know what the sport's going to look like in 3 years, let alone in 10 years. And
you don't know how many guys are headed for the portal next week.
Everybody's trying to fire their coach.
Yeah.
Can Wisconsin afford their coach? Can Florida State afford it? Can Florida afford? Everyone wants to fire their coach all of a sudden, because I think they've hired coaches for the last era, and this is a new one. And the schools that figure out it's the new one are going to do a lot better. It just doesn't. Northwestern had some good players. UCLA has some good players.
Yep.
They were terrible, and Northwestern hasn't been good for a few years, but they have a portal and they got rev share and they got money. Some of these guys aren't bad. It doesn't take 5 years to rebuild a program anymore.
And the biggest thing, Pete, to Dan's point that I agree with is, can you get them to play? Because that's the secret. That's the secret in the NFL. Yep. In most cases, maybe you have a discrepancy or a deficiency, I should say, at a certain position that might give you a weakness. But basically, can you get them to play? And maybe, and I think that is a fair criticism, and really defends Penn State's decision about doing this. Is that up to this point in the season, with the notable exception of the Oregon game, he hadn't been able to get them to play. No. Even the first 3 games that they won, they did not look good. They didn't look crisp. And who knows why that is? I mean, it'll be easy to say, well, NIL, whatever. It could be a million different reasons, but whatever it was, the bottom line was they didn't look like a team that was on a rise. They didn't look great. You almost kept them ranked in the top 5 because I've seen all these guys play before. I know they're good. They're bound to play well soon. And it hasn't happened up to this point.
So I thought about this today, and I don't think this speaks to any greater point. Dan's making all these great macro points. So all offseason, I said the smartest thing Penn State did was schedule 3 cupcakes to start the year. They'll warm up just like Ohio State did last year, just like Michigan did 2 years ago, found an identity, built towards things, found themselves, developed, found the second string guys, the third string guys, and built as a team, and then went like a slingshot into league play. I think the worst thing that happened to Penn State was they got to play with their food for a month, because look at Alabama. The best thing that happened to Alabama was that Florida State depantsed them, emasculated them, and humiliated them. And after that happened, Alabama came together. Kalen DeBoer changed his tenor of how he coached the team, and they saw adversity. They saw they were ripped coast to coast, and they came together and they've played a lot harder. They didn't play hard in that Florida State game, and they've played a lot better. So in a lot of ways, Penn State just never finding itself for a month when they've needed to come together at key times. Now, they did it in the fourth quarter. It took them to the fourth quarter, but they did in the fourth quarter against Oregon, so give them credit for that. They were just never able to gel. They didn't have any identity. Mm-hmm. They didn't have any high leverage plays the first 3 games that really pressed them into figuring out who they were. And I just think that's one of those small variables. And I'm not saying they were right to schedule, wrong to schedule, whatever it is. I just think that's sort of they were flat and they were never able to get resuscitated.
The mental side of this, Dan, is exactly right, because it's my understanding that the Penn State players had really pointed to the Oregon game. That was all they cared about. They knew that no matter what they did, the first 3 games they were going to win, didn't matter. And they pointed to this game. And when they lost, they were devastated, because I probably should clarify one thing. I don't think they played their best. I think maybe they've been distracted for whatever reason. But the one thing is I think they cared. They had to have cared, for as devastating as that loss was to them. And they weren't able to rebound. That, too, another indictment of the leader of the program in a lot of ways, because it is your job, to use your example, Pete, to do what Kalen DeBoer did. When season's half over, and at Alabama and Penn State and Notre Dame, places like that, it turns on a dime. You're only as good as your last game. But up to this point, they have turned it around. They answered the challenge. Penn State did not. And that's an indictment of leadership, both from the coaching offices and also within the locker room.
Yeah, and I think that characteristic is going to be potentially the key thing to look for in your next coach. Now, it's very hard to find, and it's very hard to snuff out. But you're absolutely right. Kalen DeBoer took a team that played without a lot of heart and got pushed around, and they have developed toughness and heart, and they're playing all in. And he spun it. I look back a year ago to Marcus Freeman. They blow a game against Northern Illinois. And in the old days of college football, if you lost to a team like Northern Illinois, it was because you weren't good. In this era, it's you took a week off. Like, the Jets are going to win a game this year in the NFL. Knock on wood for all the Jets fans out there. But, you don't normally go 0-16. You have to be ready every single week. And sometimes you just aren't. And Notre Dame wasn't. But how did they rally and go? You're kind of seeing it with Clemson right now. I'm not saying they're going to play off or whatever, but they're rallying and save your season. The great coaches are going to be able to brush off the bad loss, and the losses aren't as bad. It's just closer. The great teams are not as great. The bad teams are not as bad. Everything's in the middle. I think you have the expectation of the helmet. You have the expectation of we are born to go 10-2. And I think you had, honestly, a couple years there, 5-6 years of coaches and ADs and commissioners and politicians telling you that NIL would make it so non-competitive in this sport that all the good teams would be unbeatable. And it was the exact opposite of what is true. These teams are better. And so, yeah, UCLA's 0-4. They also got Nico Iamaleava. He's better quarterback. Might be better quarterback than you got. And so maybe he wins a game. Maybe he wins 2. Maybe they win 6. I don't know. You have to be able to coach each week. You have to come in with great game plans. You have to be really sharp in-game coaching, and you have to be able to motivate your guys week in, week out. They talk about, I hate keep bringing up the NFL, but I feel like this podcast, you talk to NFL coaches, they always say the biggest thing to do is when you lose a game, you don't lose 2. You don't let last week's loss beat you this week. It is the big thing. They talk it's Sunday night, so the Lions are playing right now. Dan Campbell hasn't lost consecutive games in years now with the Detroit Lions. They look terrible. They win the next week because you're gonna lose, right? It's the pitcher that gives up the home run ball. It's gonna happen. It's the quarterback that throws the pick. It's gonna happen. What do you do on your next pass? These programs can't just sit there and say, we lost to Oregon. We got 3 weeks. We'll win those games. then we'll play. They didn't like that anymore. And so it's just a whole different thing. And I don't know that a lot of the coaches that are flailing about right now are really built for what's coming and what's here. And there's other coaches that are, and those programs, boom.
No, I was going to say that's a good segue to both the biggest topic of the weekend and the biggest topic of the sport this week. Biggest topic of the weekend. I'm playing host here, Rece, so feel free to shush me. Was Oregon losing to Indiana? Our hero, the Hoosiers, the face of the new era, the fluorescent face of possibility, right?
64-year-old man.
The hyperbole we could wax and spin on a Sig and what he has done there. And it also goes to, the biggest story until the end of the season, I think, is who will get the Penn State job. That is going to be a big, looming, fascinating topic because of a lot of the stuff that we just said, like this new era, who fits, how do you do it? Better win a championship at some point, better be ready for high expectations. And so I want to reflect a little on the weekend, but I also want to say, I think an interesting segue is, should Curt Cignetti contemplate the Penn State job? Because he certainly earned, any look he could get.
It depends on what he wants, Pete. And here's what I mean by that. You and I had a little bit of a discussion this afternoon about it. And to Dan's point, and it's the correct one, you can win a national championship a lot of different places now. And I think Curt Cignetti proved yesterday. Now, look, who knows what they're going to do from this point out. But he proved last year making the playoff and yesterday's win on the road, getting rid of that albatross of not beating, an elite team on a big stage, that you can win a championship pretty much anywhere. But I maintain that while I agree with Dan's point that the Dusty Heismans and the helmets might not carry the weight they used to, if you are motivated by being an all-time legend in the grand scope of the game, or if you are happy being a local legend where they put up a statue to you at your school and people go, oh yeah, he was a really good coach, then there's no reason to leave. But if you are aspiring to be one of the all-time greats and recognized as such, maybe I should rephrase that, recognized as such, because there are a lot of coaches who didn't coach at these places who are all-time greats, but they don't pop to mind immediately. If he wants that, then some of these quote unquote big name, big tradition jobs, big expectations, fire you when you lose 3 in a row in mid-season, talk about firing you when you lose the season opener, then you should go there and you should try that if you aspire to that. If your goal is simply to try to build a program that wins a championship and you find personal satisfaction in that, there's no reason to listen to Penn State or any other job that might come open that rumors about Florida, or, I guess probably there's talk at Auburn now. I don't know that Auburn is at that tier of jobs, but I mean, they'll whack a coach pretty fast, but I don't know that all time greats, if they're the same ones, but some of those other ones, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Michigan, USC, Penn State, places like that. If you aspire to be one of the all-time legends of the game, that your name pops to mind immediately, then you do. If your goal was to simply be the best of your era and win a championship in your era, there's no need. He's got it great. Because also when he inevitably, to Dan's point, when no matter how good, and I think Cignetti's terrific. I Googled him. I think he's great. But he inevitably at some point, if he stays in Indiana long enough, is going to go 7-5. He's going to. And so and nobody's going to say boo. Nobody's going to say boo at Indiana the one year they take a half step back after this. Depends on so the answer is, it depends on what you want.
So I think that he can contemplate. Hell yeah, contemplate and tell your bosses you're contemplating. Take a couple million more on the pile, brother. Buy
another pink house, Sig.
Yeah, absolutely buy another pink house. Fantastic.
It's a pop culture reference, Rece. I don't make many.
Melon
I'm going to retire.
Get America, you and me.
Yeah. Anyway, I wouldn't leave. You can win national championship at Indiana. Curt Cignetti can win national championship at Indiana. He can win it this year. That game on Saturday, they didn't just defeat Oregon. They beat them. They were better. Oregon had a long pass play and a pick six, or it wouldn't even have been as close. They were better. They're better in the trenches. They were better all over. And I was the guy a week ago saying Oregon, maybe they should be ranked number 1. I think Oregon's going to be a playoff team and a scary out. They were better. They can do this. Maybe they can't beat. I don't know who they can't beat, but they look as good as anyone. In this era of the sport, Indiana is not a poverty program. They got boosters just like Penn State. Just because they didn't invest in football 40 years ago the way Penn State invested in football 40 years ago or 60 years ago or 80 years ago, it doesn't matter. Yes, it will help a little in recruiting when you have, hey, look at this. We won the title back in 86. And, well, you went to the Fiat. You wouldn't have believed it. They had, all this stuff. It helps, but it isn't the determining factor anymore. It's who you can get now. And so I could see somebody saying, look, I want to go to a place that has more proximity to easy to recruit talent, maybe someplace in the South or in Ohio State or something. I'm not saying there aren't still tiers, but man, those tiers are a lot closer.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, it's easier to coach to manage the Yankees than it is the Brewers, but who's got a better team this year? And so it's there are this he does not need to leave. He's making a ton of money. He's got the boosters going. More will be activated. It just doesn't matter. And if you're sitting there going, where do I want to play football right now? I got a hard time finding a whole lot of places. There are going to be plenty of kids saying, I'm going to play for this guy. And it's not about all that other stuff. So if he wants to be a legend of the sport, win a title at Indiana. Penn State hasn't won a national championship in, I don't know what, 40 years?
1986.
Okay. Almost 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic place, and they invested a long time ago, and they built a culture of that sport there. But these days, if a tradition mattered all this much in college basketball, Indiana basketball would be good, and it hasn't been good lately.
I ran into some guys on the street corner wearing the candy stripe warm-ups, and I
awesome.
complimented them, and they immediately said, we're a football school now.
Yeah.
So 2 thoughts on this. One is, I don't think Cignetti is going to go from a pure practical standpoint. I'm certainly not putting Indiana in the playoff, but I think at this point, sitting there at number 3, the game at Penn State, which was their big road test, looks a lot less intimidating, right? They had Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State coming into the season. We thought we'd know a lot about them, and they were tested at Iowa, and they were obviously tested at Oregon. The first college football playoff weekend, and Rece, you might know this off the top of your head, I believe is December 19th, 20th, that weekend.
That's correct.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Correct.
So if Indiana makes the playoff, there's like 0 chance you can go to another job. Like, you could talk through some hypotheticals and maybes in house, but if you're an Indiana fan, you are really rooting for Sig to go to the playoff. And he is an old school, no distraction guy. I remember when he was at JMU and they were FCS and they were going to the playoffs and some job opened, and I listed him as a candidate. And he actually wrote on Twitter. I'd never met him before. He wrote on Twitter, "No, not interested." And then he DM'd me later. It was just like, "Hey man, like, couldn't use the distraction." But that's, if you know him a little bit, that's kind of how that guy's wired. Like, he's not going to have one foot somewhere else. He has never, in the 2 years that I've dealt with him in Indiana, to me, like, pondered another job, thought about another job. Now, I'm not naive. I'm not Pollyannish. I think he thinks that he can just do everything he wants in Indiana. Like, why would he need to go somewhere else? And I give the athletic director to Indiana, Scott Dolson, a lot of credit. USC went after their strength coach. Now, Dan was talking about like the world in 2019 and 2023 compared to now. In no time in the last 150 years of college football has the University of Southern California gone after a coach at Indiana. And the guy said no. But you know what they did? They paid him a boatload of money, and he stayed. Now, he had belief in Sig and all that stuff. And, but like, that's Derek Owings is his name. That's a big deal. Strength coach is a big deal. Bryant Haynes, the defensive coordinator who pitched basically a shutout in the second half.
Well,
he was unbelievable. He's a top 5 defensive coordinator in the country, and he's getting paid like it. He's I think he's at over $2.2 million. So they gave him a raise because there was some interest in him at the end of last season. And then Penn State came after him before they hired Jim Knowles. And they came after him hard. And Scott Dolson just said, we are not going to get outbid. We're getting the same $70 million check from the Big Ten. So if you're going to leave here, it's not going to be for money. And that was just simply not the case the way college football was constructed previously. So, and Mike Shanahan, the offense coordinator, same thing. He's, these guys are all making plenty of money. They have access to great players. Mendoza was a coveted player on the transfer portal market. They obviously have his brother there, Alberto, which gave him an advantage in getting Fernando. But there is no limit to the possibilities of Indiana football, which is if I went on a podcast in 2021 and said that, I would have got laughed out of the country, right? It would have been the same amount of laughing if I had said James Franklin is going to be fired by Columbus Day, 3 weeks ago at practice there. But I think that's real, and I give Indiana credit. They got a taste of it, and they're like, we're not letting it go. And I think a lot of their build into this, and they gave Cignetti a huge contract, and they're certainly ready to keep going. They're not gonna go cheap on that guy, right? That's not, he's the magic sauce. So I just give them a ton of credit. And the last point, Rece, I'll make here is, I think Indiana saw a world after a couple generations of bad football where they could get left behind.
Oh yeah,
and all of a sudden they got this thunderclap of hope, and they said, we are going to hang on tight.
Well, we've brought this up, and I believed it firmly. If you don't, we've seen it at Vanderbilt too, because there will come a day, if you are not invested, if you are not bringing value to the property, that the ones who are going to say, why am I sharing my money with you? And why do we need you? And why do people want to see games against you? And that brings us to Dan's point about elevating. But what you said, and I hope my point was clear. It depends on what you want. I'll stand by that about different jobs. But it also means, because you can win a lot of places, that all of the names and all of the coaches that Penn State will go after will have similar circumstances. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think it could get worse than losing all these highly ranked games, how about a steady diet of regularly losing to UCLA and Northwestern when they've been struggling? That could happen too, because they're going to go after great coaches. Everybody in the world knows that at least some type of feeler at some point, maybe after the season, whatever, will be extended to Matt Rhule because of his connection to Penn State, because of his connection to Pat Kraft. He's at Nebraska. If you can do everything that you can do at Penn State at Indiana, you certainly can at Nebraska. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to think otherwise. This is not just about Matt Rhule. That's a lot of guys that they may go after. And in Matt's case, I mean, Pete, I've been on this podcast before he took the Nebraska job, every job that opened. I think they should hire Matt Rhule. I think he's a terrific coach. But his record against top 10 opponents is bad too. So he'll have to answer for that. You name any other candidate that gets thrown out for any big job. Every time there's a job that comes open, they talk about Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell's a great coach. Same situation, maybe different conference, maybe a little different financially. But he's been there a long time. He's happy where he is. Family likes it there. Why go? You can get yourself down to the B or C tier really, really fast when you make a coaching change. And that's why I understand the frustration of Penn State fans. I understand the frustration of the administration and the players, and certainly of the coaches themselves. They won a lot of games, and there is no guarantee when you go through the pain of a coaching transition that is going to continue, let alone that just bringing in somebody else is going to guarantee that you win these big games against Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan or Indiana or whoever else, might be highly ranked at the time. There is no guarantee of that. It doesn't mean you have to hold on to your coach. Don't mean that. I'm just saying, just getting rid of a guy because you're mad at him and posted on Message Board Genius, who I love to reference, by the way, just because you got mad at them and posted on there, we should fire him. He's no good. You don't know that it's going to be better. Might be, but you don't know. And neither do the people doing the hiring.
So let me give a couple points on all of that stuff. A couple things with Penn State is they got to have the money to buy out somebody if they're going Power 5. Or Power
Sig
4,
is $9 million. Rule's
Sig
like
is
4 or
10,
5.
I think. 10 million.
9, 10. Yeah, it's close between 9 and 10.
They're going to spend $60 million getting rid of the last staff. 49 for Franklin. You got coordinators. I mean, I know they're trying to do this private equity thing, but this is not helping the private equity argument. Because it's like we're just blowing money here and there. We have to do, private capital, whatever. They got a $700 million stadium renovation. They weren't budgeted to have to do this. That's another 10. Rhule's 5, I think. I will say this, though, as much as I respect the Nebraska program, I do think there's a difference in Nebraska. There's a much bigger difference in Nebraska and Penn State than Indiana and Penn State. And this is my opinion, and I know this breaks all sensibilities the last half century of football, sure. Maybe 100. Proximity to talent does matter, and there is very little in-state talent in Nebraska compared to Pennsylvania. Okay, you are loaded up in Pennsylvania, where you're going to start your recruiting class with 15 pretty good to really dang good players, and you're close to everything else, even though you got this thing. Indiana has good players, and you're much more centrally located to Michigan and Ohio and in the South and just Indianapolis areas, much more prevalent players in Indiana and Illinois and all that than Nebraska. Nebraska's got a lot more of a challenge on that. So I could see a Matt Rhule saying, I can win better at Penn State than Nebraska more than Curt Cignetti would say, I can win better. And I get it. I just think throw everything you know out. Now, to Rece's point, he's absolutely right. Be careful what you wish for, because even in the old era, we watched these programs that were too big to fail. And you go, what? How could Texas wander through what is USC, Tennessee? Like, is there a better program naturally than Tennessee? They went a long time going, man, Fulmer wasn't that bad after all, right? Like, it can happen. There's no foolproof plan here. And especially these days compared to the last days.
I'll give you a really good example of this. Even the hire that seems perfect, sometimes inexplicably, isn't working. I present to you Billy Napier at Florida. I still say that was an outstanding hire. I still believe he's a really good coach. They're not winning enough yet. I hope he gets a chance to, against a tough schedule, to win it, because I'm fond of him personally. I believe him to be a good coach. But, they've got to win more. And when they hired him, and now Dan Mullen had won a lot of games there too. We should point that out. But when they hired him, I was like, this is going to be good. And it's been fits and starts. It's been average up to this point. You just don't know.
What about Luke Fickell at Wisconsin?
Luke Fickell.
A dozen plus years as a thumper coordinator in the Big Ten, took Cincinnati to the college football playoff in a completely different era than we are in right now, and had a loaded team. He had an NFL quarterback. He had Sauce Gardner at one corner. He had Kobe Bryant, who I believe won the scoreboard at the other corner. Yeah. I mean, they were really, really good. And that recruited, developed the whole thing. And again, maybe Dan, like, this is the point. You can't build it like Luke built it at Cincinnati anymore. Find the unpolished 3-star, the overlooked guy, guy who left Ohio for somewhere and then came home and then, and developed him. So but I thought when Wisconsin hired him, I was like, no brainer. It just, to me, I was just like, that's an easy way to get the legs to go. Now, he obviously made the mistake of trying to change the offense, which handcuffed them the first 2 years. And, bringing it back to Smash Mouth has obviously not gone well this season. I
do wonder, and even to that point, really the heart and soul, the exception of the quarterbacks, from Cignetti's great success at Indiana. And he certainly won prior to Indiana, but has been guys that he brought with him that were seasoned, proven players who were NFL caliber players in many cases, who had been a little overlooked and had been developed. Those guys are going to cycle out soon. So he's going to face a test too. I mean, everybody does this. I mean, I think this amplifies your point, Dan. It's year to year, even for guys who know exactly what they're doing. Curt Cignetti knows exactly how to build a football program. And you think it's going to be easy for him next year, again, the year after? No, he's going to have to do it all over again. All of them are.
You got to have players. You see it. So the NBA is a little more patient sometimes when there's injuries, but you see like a Steve Kerr win title after title, and then all of a sudden everyone's hurt and they win 30 games. And occasionally, Popovich, right? Like win, and then okay, we're back. Now he's retired, obviously. But so you have a little bit of it in basketball where they're able to kind of bridge that when they get the right guy. But other than that, man, everything's quick now. Do not sign anyone to a long-term deal. Do not be stuck owing people $50 million. Do not be stuck. Everything is new. Everything is new. This era of sport to me is so much more interesting. It's more competitive. It's more exciting. I think it's better. Anything can happen any week. The stadiums are full. And I think there's too many decision makers and too many coaches sitting there either pining to go back or trying to think like it used to be or complaining about it. And it's like, man, and then there's some guys coming in just saying, hey, I don't really care. You could see it even at the way Texas Tech is running their program, right? Maybe it's Cody Campbell, but him and Joey McGuire's like, yeah, okay, we're going to go win. We're here to win the national title. And everyone goes, wait. Not well, look at their team. Pretty dang good.
They look good, man.
They're good, man. They're really good.
Playoff
yeah.
Built
it with a defensive front.
Yeah.
I guess we're getting football nerdy now, but a lot of these programs, I think they go quarterback, wide receiver, and you need those things. You need explosive playmakers. That's, Nick Saban talks about that a lot now, that you can't win the old way anymore. You have to be able to make explosive plays. But you can't just have that. You need some ticket takers up front, and Texas Tech has them. They're good. Hey, before we wrap this, you guys have a final thought on the Penn State firing, change, candidates, what you expect?
Let's make a prediction. Let's all predict who we're going to who's going to be the next Penn State coach.
Boy, that really puts guys who have jobs in a bad position, but that's okay. I would like to have one thing. But we're going to do it. This is what podcasts
Penn State in the title game. We were completely wrong. So when I say I think maybe Matt Campbell gets the job, sorry, Matt, you ain't getting it.
Hey, Dan, I want to challenge. Dan, I need to challenge you on one thing. You said no, don't do anybody long-term contracts. Don't give people $50 million, with the exception of your friendly local broadcasters, writers, or podcast hosts. That's okay. We don't mind.
That's true. This present company excluded.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Make a prediction,
Pete. $50 million buyout, and I will tank the next 3 podcasts. You think Penn State was bad against UCLA? Wait till you see how bad I am if I got $50 million on getting fired.
I'm going to say it's one of the Matts, Campbell or Rhule. I'm not convicted on either, but I think it's going to be a Matt.
I like either of those as a real possibility. I think it makes sense on both sides, but there's not been a lot of power 4 to power 4 moves. You got to go down, but
it's hard.
I think both of these guys would make a lot of sense. Here's another name, Pat Fitzgerald. Maybe they don't want to go through it, but Pat Fitzgerald is sitting there as, if I'm Wisconsin, I'm crawling to his place. What happened with the lawsuit is he's got cleared, or, I don't want to use the exact language, but whatever. I'm hiring Pat Fitzgerald. I'm taking a look at Pat Fitzgerald. I want to hear how he would do it in this era. That's a great football coach.
That's a great call. And he, I'm told, eager and ready to coach and wants a head coaching job like yesterday. So that's a great call.
Is there a better obvious guy than Wisconsin and Pat Fitzgerald? It's like probably.
Yeah. And look, I'm sort of like Napier. I'm rooting for Billy. I'm rooting for Fickle too. I hope they, hope they get it straightened out and all of that stuff. Yeah. I would say if I had to make one, if you had to dance around it, I'm going to say Rhule because of the Penn State tie, and also because, and Pete, you would know more about this than I, maybe he has a wonderful relationship with the new athletic director, but there is the proverbial, the guy who's the boss now didn't hire him. So, maybe it's a wonderful relationship.
He and Dan are really close, and Rhule was part of sort of the selection of Dan. They all go back to the AAC, but Rhule and Pat Kraft are like best friends.
Right, exactly.
They are like unusually close in that.
Which might even make it a detriment to hire, because my understanding of their friendship is that it would extend well beyond any type of business friendship that you have.
They're close
and sometimes
friends.
That makes it that's a tough strain to put on a friendship sometimes. So maybe neither guy would want that. So, but I think if you're making me make a prediction, I probably go there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No,
what'd you say?
Maybe they both get huge buyouts. It all goes south, and they move to the Caribbean and live next to each other in St. Croix.
Yeah. They usually go to the Jersey Shore.
Working and failing at Penn State seems like a heck of a good thing. I mean, let's not shed too many tears for James Franklin.
Well, it's not as good as having it happen at Texas A&M.
No,
but it's not. It's still pretty good.
3 guys are working on Sunday night, and one guy isn't. He's counting his money. I'm just saying.
That's true. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. all James Franklin edition. And look, I think I'll say this. We're all fond of James. Wish him well.
Yeah,
figure he'll be
absolutely.
back in coaching.
Yeah.
And more than likely will win some big games at some other place. And people will scratch their heads and say, how in the world did that not happen at Penn State? Thanks for listening. Download this podcast wherever you prefer to get your podcast, or subscribe and never miss an episode.